Okay. Hello. Thank you for attending this webinar on Alzheimer's presented by Brightbot.com. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. My name is Marcy Starkman. I am a licensed psychiatric clinical neurospecialist. My talk's going to be based on my clinical knowledge and experience, but please know that in no way is it to be considered as a substitute for any kind of medical or professional advice. I'm going to present for about 20 minutes. During this time, while I'm talking, all your mics will be muted in order to minimize any audio interference and so that everyone can hear me. At the end of my talk, I'll open up the mics and certainly invite your questions and your comments. So if you think of something while I'm talking, please scribble it down so that we can address it when I'm done, okay? Please don't be shy. We need your help and input to get this information out there. So let's get started, okay? Thanks. All right, what is Alzheimer's? It's very common in terms of what we hear on the news and the TV all the time, but what it really is a progressive neurologic disease. It destroys memory and other important mental functions like thinking, language skills, problem solving. It cannot be prevented. Like you can't say to yourself, well, if I eat the right thing or I take the right medicine or I exercise, can I hold it off? No, you cannot prevent it. And the other thing about it that makes it so difficult is that it cannot be cured. So I have to give you the bad news right at the beginning of my talk. It also affects people's behavior, their bodily functions, their motor skills, things like walking, swallowing, and eating. So it does affect the whole person for sure. Statistics which are really important. Out of all the dementias, and there's several different kinds, people can have up to 3 or 4 different kinds of dementias, and those are illnesses, neurological, neurodegenerative illnesses that actually affect the brain. 60 to 80 of them are Alzheimer's. The other 20 to 40 are other neurodegenerative diseases. There are 5 million people right now living with it, and these numbers are increasing. It's the 6th leading cause of death. It is right now the biggest epidemic in the United States. So, and it's only going to get worse. One of the reasons is because of baby boomers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. 6 out of 10 people with Alzheimer's wander. So that means they leave where they are, they walk around, they don't have a specific place in mind. And I just put out that statistic because I think it's very important to consider. That's one of the a major concern with people with Alzheimer's, especially. I live in Florida, so if someone wanders, it's not quite as much a problem as if they live in Maine, perhaps in the middle of winter, and they go outside with their pajamas on and start wandering. They are much more at risk in terms of their safety, although they're certainly at risk down here as well for other problems. But weather-related fatalities from wandering Alzheimer's patients are quite big up north. Okay, so what causes it? Well, like all diseases, it can be related to a person's lifestyle, their environment, but primarily genetics. It runs in families. If there's someone in your family who has Alzheimer's, then you are at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's as well. Usually with early onset, this genetic mutation is present in about 5% of people who develop Alzheimer's before they're 65. So if you've got genetics, one implication of that is to get tested to see if in fact you have the gene, which of course opens up a whole nother ball of wax, because do you want to know or do you not want to know? Some people do want to know, some people don't, obviously. anyone who decides to have genetic testing really does need to have genetic counseling, because obviously once you hear the results, you're going to need to know how to cope with them, either for the positive or of course for the negative. Later onset Alzheimer's is because of toxic changes in the brain itself, the brain chemicals. The actual brain size does diminish the older we get, and then the brain has less connections, less nerve cells, more of the toxic chemical as time goes on, and that's why more people develop Alzheimer's at a later age. It can show up sometimes, very rarely, as early as 30 or 40, but it's more common after 65. And I've heard people joke about that. They'll say to each other, "Oh, you must be developing Alzheimer's. Where's my key? Where's your keys? You know, you never can find your keys. You must be, you know," where you stand in front of the refrigerator to get something and you forget what it is you went there for. You say to yourself, "Oh no, I must be developing Alzheimer's." We're going to talk about, you know, what is kind of a momentary lapse in your memory compared to perhaps an illness process going on that needs to be explored further. Okay, there's other possible causes being researched, and none of these are engraved in stone right now, but they are things that are interesting in terms of people's lifestyles and you know, what effects lifestyle might have on the brain eventually, and it is being studied. For some reason, anti-anxiety medications called benzodiazepines, which are in the family of Valium, Ativan, people who take that for anxiety, they are apparently more prone to develop Alzheimer's later. So that's kind of a caveat. I also wonder, I didn't find it in my reading, but I also wonder that if just the biochemical changes that take place in your brain as a result of being highly anxious and needing medication may have something to do with it. And I guess that's going to be a factor that gets teased out. Loneliness and isolation. People that are alone are more prone to develop Alzheimer's so far. Traumatic brain injury, concussions, people who are in accidents or who play sports, who hit their heads. Obviously, you're damaging the brain. Anything that damages the brain damages the nerve cells, damages the metabolic process. Also, regular sleep deprivation can also stress the brain. There are some people that I've seen in my practice that are chronic insomniacs. They cannot sleep. They have maybe 3 hours sleep a night, 4 hours sleep a night. Well, if you don't get a good sleep and you wake up in the morning and you're not rested, this obviously stresses your brain and your body. And then finally, metabolic reasons. Someone called it, there's a type 1 diabetes, there's a type 2 diabetes. One is what you get when you're young. Type 2 is what you get as an adult. And they're saying that these changes in the brain might be a form of diabetes type 3. And this is because all of our organs use glucose, sugar, as fuel. And insulin tells the body how to use the sugar. If the insulin's not working, then there's too much sugar. Too much sugar can be toxic. So that's also something. So this is all being studied as we speak. So just things to keep in mind in terms of other causes that might be leading to Alzheimer's. Signs and symptoms. I kind of put all these pictures up because I thought this would really spark your own brain in terms of what kinds of things we're looking for when we're trying to say, well, does someone have Alzheimer's or not? Obviously, we're not going to look at pictures and say, okay, he meets this picture, and this picture, so yes, he's got it. But the signs and symptoms are common, and there are clinically proven tests that can be done to determine if someone is manifesting the beginning or at some stage of Alzheimer's. So the first one with the calculator is that the person can't do simple math. They used to be able to balance their checkbook, but now they're having trouble with that. They can't seem to add up numbers or do math the way that they used to. The one in the middle, falls. Falls become very common. Also, a fall can certainly precipitate a brain injury. Older people, when they fall, puts them at risk for all kinds of diseases. And I could do an entire presentation on the hazards of falling in the elderly, because it does set forth many, many physical problems. Someone I've had several patients who are doing really, really well, independent in their homes, taking care of themselves, preparing their own meals, doing everything. They fall, and all of a sudden they're in the hospital, and it's a downward spiral from there, because they may develop a reaction to medications that they're given in the hospital for pain, the change in scene, the change in diet, the actual, maybe there was trauma to their head at the time. So they may develop pneumonia. And once an old person starts to develop all of these things, it's like kind of a downward slope. So we really want to keep older people from falling, although it is a hazard of Alzheimer's. They may not be able to feed themselves towards the end. Early stages, it's more like the math and the thinking. And then as time goes on, the motor skills become more evident. Anger, you may see mental status changes. A person whose personality changes, maybe they were very easygoing and happy, and then all of a sudden they're very cross and irritable and nasty and perhaps paranoid, accusing you of stealing their things. I'd love to have a nickel for every one of my home care patients who accuses one of their caregivers of stealing their stuff. And there's just no way, because there was no stuff to steal in the first place. But because of the changes that are going on in their brains, they think, someone's stealing or someone's trying to come in and hurt them. That's paranoia. They may have depression. They may know that something's not right, that they're not the person that they were before. Leaving pots on the stove. They are definitely a safety risk. It comes to the point that some people actually have to be removed from their homes or have all the stove disconnected, the microwave disconnected, everything unplugged, because they're not reliable enough to leave a pot on the stove without setting the whole house on fire. So there are many, many safety risks. They may not recognize people. One of the worst late symptoms that I've seen is that the person does not recognize their own family. And the family goes to visit them, and they have no idea who their child is. And many children have told me, it's like my mother died already. She's still alive and she's breathing, but at this point, she's not my mother. She doesn't even know who I am. So there's a lot of guilt involved as well. So those are some of the things that can go wrong in terms of signs and symptoms. Also, there's muscle wasting. The person can't support their body weight like they used to. In the end, they may forget to swallow, and that's a problem. And in our society, one of the things is we don't want to let our old people go gracefully. Families say, do everything, even if the person is not who they were when they were younger. They can't talk anymore. They can't eat anymore independently. They're falling. And our society is kind of on the wavelength that we have to do everything we can and keep people as alive as possible. And that's certainly a debate for discussion. In terms of treatments, what treatments are out there? And again, pardon me, my slides not going. Okay. Current meds that are out there cannot cure Alzheimer's or stop it from progressing. So keep that in mind. It can lessen the symptoms for a limited time, preventing the inevitable, but it can't stop the disease. The US FDA has approved 2 types of medications. One is called a cholinesterase inhibitor. The other one is called memantine, and that one is to help the person's memory. The first one is to help with the biochemical changes and this plaque formation that goes on in the nerve cells. But again, older people are, especially when they're having problems with forgetfulness, They have to be supervised. They have to take the medication the way it's supposed to be taken. They have to be monitored for side effects and things like that. And unfortunately, that's not always possible. And they're kind of a temporary fix. They're not a solution for the problem. There are lots of issues affecting people with Alzheimer's, and this could be, again, a whole talk on itself. The main one that I always put at the top of the list is safety. If the person's not safe, then everything else is kind of less important. You have to make sure that the person's not going to wander away and get hit by a car or freeze or set the house on fire or fall and not have a way to contact other people. That's why those lifeline devices are excellent. Finances. It can cost up to $4,000 to $6,000 a month to put a person with Alzheimer's in a assisted memory care living facility. That's a lot of money. That might wipe out the old person's savings. Maybe they didn't have the savings to start with. Many, many really good private places are not covered by health insurance, which again is a whole nother discussion. There's long waiting lists for Medicaid to get the person into any kind of care facility. And by the time they get in, they may not be alive anymore. There's sandwich generation. You have a child taking care of their own children and their parent at the same time, and that puts a lot of stress on the family. The healthcare system is overburdened, and it's going to be even more overburdened as baby boomers become older. And of course, you know, we need future research, more clinical trials to find out what does work earlier and if something will help it. But that's again, that's a financial issue, and mental health issues are not as, let's say, sexy as some of the more physical health issues are. So there tends to be less money that goes to them. But over time, you know, as you and I are getting older, it's going to be more and more important that money be devoted to research. I'm going to leave this one for right now. There are certain ways to communicate with a person with Alzheimer's that make it easier because they're paranoid, perhaps, because they are very repetitive. They're asking you the same question over and over and over again. They'll come to you and say, is it time to eat? No, Mom, you just ate 10 minutes ago. And then 2 minutes later, they're back, I think it's time to eat. And in order to avoid losing your patience as a caregiver, there are certain ways that you can communicate that are very respectful. You treat the person with dignity, and you reassure them, and you try and allay their own fears and anxieties. Self-care for the caregiver. This is my favorite topic. You can tell from the picture, what do they tell you to do on a plane, right? They say, put your own mask on first before you can help somebody else. The same thing is true for helping anyone in your life who needs your help, be it Alzheimer's or any other kind of illness. You have to take care of yourself first. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. If the glass is empty, there's nothing left to drink. So part of your task as a caregiver is to keep filling that cup up, filling it up, putting your own mask on, doing what you need to do, whether it's to say no when you need to ask for help, which is very hard for people to do. Very hard to say, I can't do this, I need some help. There are a lot of really good strategies for that, but the number one thing is if you can't take care of yourself because you're so stressed out and guilty, you're gonna have a hard time taking care of the person who needs you. And sometimes because of the financial issues, you have to keep this person at home. You don't have a choice. So, you know, it takes a lot of people to help when you have a new child, and it takes a lot of time if your parent or your relative progresses into childlike behavior. I'm not going to go through this, it'll be on the slides, but this is from one of my resources, and they are questions that you should ask yourself, and if you answer yes to several of them or any of them, then you probably should be screened further. And it's not just one screaming. You just don't go to a doctor and you say, look, doctor, I have, yes. Do I have Alzheimer's? That's not how it works. But it's enough. If you answer yes, you do need to see if there's anything really neurologically happening to you, because some things are reversible early. They're not all, you know, a downward slope Some things are metabolic changes. You might find out you have diabetes and you just get your blood sugar straightened out and on the right medication and the problems go away. So that's certainly something to think about. These are the resources that I have for you. If you Google Alzheimer's disease, obviously, it will come up with all kinds of information. I like these because these specify evidence-based scientific research, not, some of the websites are more consumer related and they haven't been studied and there's no studies to back them up or anything. And I like science behind conclusions. So these are good ones. Also, there are many resources in terms of hooking you up with support groups. So you can talk to other people who are going through what you're going through as a caregiver, or yourself as someone who you're afraid perhaps you're developing Alzheimer's, or you've been told that you have the gene, whatever. You can't go through this life alone, and it's really important to find the resources that you can that are out there, but go with reliable ones, and these are some recommendations. So I'm going to stop right now, open up my mic. Please feel free to jump in. I went through an awful lot of information in a short amount of time, and probably each one of my slides could have been one talk. So I do thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Just jump in at any time.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know it, that it cannot be cured, but can it be slowed down?
Yes, it can be slowed down. That's what those medications were that I was talking to you about, the cholinesterase inhibitors. That's what keeps the plaques from forming and causing more destruction in the brain, keeps the nerve cells from dying as much. And also the same thing, the memantine works on the brain in a similar way. The thing is, some older people, or some people with that they're trying to prevent, they don't work on everybody, you know? Sometimes it's trial and error. And the other thing is that there aren't that many medications out there. There's been more in the last 10 years or so, plus the fact that there's the cost factor. They're expensive, they're not cheap medications. They are developing ones. There's one called Exelon that's a patch. So that patch can be put on the person so that you don't have to worry as much if they're going to get the right dose at the right time. It'll slow it up in the people that it works for, but it won't stop it from happening. It's just prolonging the inevitable, I'm afraid.
So is there a particular stage that it will not work, or will it just slow it down no matter what stage you're in?
I think it slows it down at whatever stage you're in. I mean, by the time the person is in late stages where they're not able to feed themselves, they're not able to swallow, they're not able to walk, they're bedridden. No, that would not be a time. I believe that it's either the earlier the better. The earlier that the person is diagnosed, and it should be, you know, a really comprehensive assessment with maybe the medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a geriatric specialist. Geriatric specialist is called a geriatrician, and they don't just tell right away from looking at a person, oh, this person's got Alzheimer's, you know, and if they shouldn't do that in the first 10 minutes of an office visit. They really do need a brain scan, CAT scan, you know, various neurological tests to determine, in fact, if that is what's going on. Because if it's not, they can give them medications that, you know, somebody who looks like they have Alzheimer's, but they're not going to help them because those meds are specifically for Alzheimer's. That's a great question. Thank you.
Question. How far is the research, and is it actively going on? The research as far as trying to find a cure for it, or slowing it down, or something.
Yes.
You know.
Thank you. Well, you know, if they poured all the money in the world into it, they might find an answer a lot faster. And you know what the competition is out there for research dollars. However, let me tell you, I did recently see a special on PBS, and if you can catch it, that's great, because I learned a lot from that. There was a woman whose mother had developed Alzheimer's at 60. and she was in her 40s, and she was very concerned that she might develop it as well, since mom had it, somebody else in the family had it. So she did enroll in something called a clinical trial. And there are many, many, many clinical trials out there. And most of these sites that I gave you as resources will tell you about clinical trials that are going on that you can join. And what they did with this particular younger woman is that they took blood from her. They compared her genes to whether or not, her mother's genes, and whether she had the same genes or not, which unfortunately she did. But that was, in a way, it was like the good news and the bad news. The bad news was she's in her 40s and she finds out she had the gene for Alzheimer's. The good news is that they could start treating her in a clinical trial. And a clinical trial means that some of the people in the study, some of the groups in the study get the medication, the experimental medication, the research medication, and part of the group doesn't, but they don't know which group gets it and which group doesn't get it. So even though she was part of the study and was being given something, it could have been a sugar pill. She would not know. And because the disease takes so long to develop, they won't know for another 5 or 10 years. In terms of research, she'll have to be followed all that time, whether or not they'll be able to help her or not from getting Alzheimer's like her mom did at age 60. I don't know, did that answer your question?
Well, to a certain extent, but thank you.
That's okay.
Because you did mention type 3 diabetes, that they said that may be associated with this some sort of dementia.
Yes.
But so then if you can reverse the diabetes, if you find that you're diabetic and you can do your diet and exercises and stuff like that,
yes,
you think that may be a major factor in assisting or slowing down this process?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not a researcher, but anything that one does to help themselves with their health, to improve their health, is all for the good. I don't know specifically how it works in terms of diabetes, because that's very metabolically mediated. Like it's part of the body's metabolism. People that are diabetic have more metabolism problems. But if you do take care of yourself, you do watch what you eat, you do exercise, who knows? I don't know. I think it's too early in the research to tell yet. It's still in the beginning phases. But whatever you do to take care of yourself in this life can't hurt you. It can only make things better.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Anthony, do you have any question for me?
Hey. I do have an observation
Yes.
whereby I know of this young lady, it's like the mother had like 5 or 6 of them, and the mother developed Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
So each week, one of the siblings would take the turns,
Yes.
going over and staying with the mother. When it comes to her turn, she would always go in and she'll say, "Hello, my name is such and such. What is your name?" And whatever the mother calls her, then she plays that role. So
yes.
she does not let that be a deterrent like the other siblings would, thinking, well, my mom, is such a burden or such like that. But she just go ahead and play this role,
Yes.
whereby, she just have a good time with her mother, so that they can play whatever games they want to play or do whatever the mother wants to do at that point in time. So I think that's such a way of dealing with it.
I think you're right. It's a coping strategy. And as long as your coping strategies don't hurt a person, I mean, it's not going to hurt her if her daughter answers to whatever name she calls her. I mean, we've seen patients in nursing homes that are given a doll baby, a toy baby, and they hold the baby and they rock it and they say that it's my baby. And for some reason that works for them. It's calming for them. Or a dog from pet therapy will come into the nursing home and the person will call the dog the name that their dog from, 40 years ago or from when they were a child. I can't see, I mean, it's my opinion, my personal opinion. If it helps a person, if it reduces their anxiety, it makes them calmer and it doesn't hurt them either physically or emotionally. I think if it works, maybe her other siblings need to think about doing the same thing to make their time with their mom less stressful.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. She sounds like she's got good kids.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. What about people whose kids live far away? Our family. There's still, that's another issue. Our families are further and further away. Plus the fact there are a lot of resources in the community, but they're overburdened, and some communities don't have resources at all. They're very rural, and it's a problem. It's a very big problem, and it does need to be looked at. Anybody else who hasn't asked me, who's been quiet, wants to ask me something?
Yes, I have two questions that may be somewhat related.
Okay.
You mentioned one at the very beginning that the numbers of Alzheimer's sufferers, patients, are increasing. Is that like a percentage increase in the population, or is it just the fact that there are larger numbers of people getting older? And the other thing is, you also mentioned it's caused by a buildup of toxic proteins in the brain.
Yes.
And question is there any evidence to show that those might be environmental, or that would affect that kind of thing, or?
That's a great question. Both the questions are good. I think that the reason that we're seeing it more is not so much that the population is increasing, but it's that the population is getting older. We are aging and we're living longer. People 30, 40 years ago didn't live till they were 90. We have a neighbor down the street right now. She's 102. She's still very functional, but people are living longer and longer because that their diabetes has been able to be managed, or they're able to have a certain kind of surgery to help themselves. That's the short answer. As far as the environment, absolutely. But they don't know exactly what the connection is. There is a connection. There's some studies going on about pollution. That pollution in the air, in the water, with what we eat, the chemicals in what we eat, can be contributing to this this death of nerve cells in the brain. So unfortunately the environment does play a role in this, and I think with most illnesses as well. Thanks.
I heard a radio doctor once mention about cooking with aluminum pots and pans. They think part of, is there any evidence to that effect?
I didn't really, I've heard that as well, and I've heard about deodorant. Deodorant has aluminum in it, some deodorant preparations, and that people are recommended to not use it. I don't know the answer to that for sure. I know that it is certainly widely talked about, but I guess anything, if you look at it, has a potential, if it wasn't there to start with, to cause damage built up over a long period of time, but I can't say for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And lastly, this is kind of more anecdotal, but yes. I have a friend, actually a former coworker whose father had Alzheimer's and passed away several years ago, and he said that there were certain signs before he actually started exhibiting the actual Alzheimer illness, that after he developed the illness, I guess healthcare people were telling him that, those are some of the signs of people who are developing Alzheimer's. Like for instance, he said that the gentleman would just leave his book on the table. He'd go out and come back, and if somebody had moved the book to the other side of the table, he would just totally go crazy. He'd get upset over that. Have you heard any
Well, not that specific. Person, when someone's routine is disrupted, when we're healthier, when our brains are functioning okay, it doesn't upset us that much. You're like, well, where did I put it? Or what am I standing in front of the refrigerator for? I forget. You kind of laugh. But when you are developing Alzheimer's, there can be definitely personality changes, this kind of paranoia, like maybe somebody moved my book, you know, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it could have, you know, there definitely, it's if the person's behavior changes in a way that's different from what their usual is. That should always be looked into further.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I think that's it for this evening. I'd like to thank you all for being here, myself and Brightbot, and I hope that you'll join me for another webinar in the near future. And your questions were terrific and much appreciated. And I look forward to hopefully meeting up with you again real soon.